for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
And welcome to Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. I'm Darren Gibson, your host today. We've got a lot of news to cover, including more on what's happening in Israel and Hamas. We'll talk about the latest updates in that war. We'll also talk about the UAW has settled contracts, at least tentatively, with Ford, Stellantis, and General Motors. We'll tell you what that's led to, and that is a teacher strike in Portland, Oregon. Solidarity, folks. That's the way you do it. Plus, when are Democrats supposedly for disclosure when they're really not? We'll talk about Governor Gretchen Whitmer's latest comments here in just a little bit. Plus, we have a Hammer Time segment for the first time in a long time. So we'll have that for you in just a little bit. Right now, before we get into today's topics, a couple of reminders. You can follow us on social media by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. You can follow us on X, the former Twitter, at Southpaws Radio. You can follow us on Tumblr at southpawsradioshow.tumblr.com. You can follow us on YouTube and Mastodon by doing a search for Southpaws Radio. You can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can listen to the show anytime at Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Podvine, and Pandora by doing a search for Southpaws. Once you found our logo, you found us. We send links to our weekly episodes to our Facebook, X, Tumblr, YouTube, and Mastodon accounts. You can listen to us on Global Community Radio Channel 1 every Saturday night at 11 Eastern. And you can listen to us on great Pacifica stations, including KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, and KZGM in Kabul, Missouri. So be sure to listen to us on your local Pacifica affiliate. We are recording this show on Wednesday, November 1st, 2023. We've already had snow in Michigan. Lovely stuff. I was not looking forward to seeing that. Something I was looking forward to seeing, our former co-host Joe Elder has an article mentioning him in Review Magazine. Joe has gone on to become quite a bit of a stand-up comic in the local Grand Rapids and West Michigan area. So they talked to Joe a little bit about Southpaws, but mostly about his comedy career. Pick up Review Magazine if you're listening locally in the area of Grand Rapids. You can pick up Review Magazine pretty much at any bar or restaurant that would have it. So be sure to grab that, and I believe that you can find it. I think Review has a website as well where you can read up on the latest happenings of our former co-host Joe Elder, and congratulations. All right, so let's get into our first topic for today, and that is the Israel-Hamas war. Here are the latest happenings. This is Najib Jobain and Sami Magdi writing for the Associated Press. This is dated November 1st out of Rafah, Gaza Strip. Hundreds of dual passport holders and dozens of seriously injured Palestinians were allowed to leave Gaza on Wednesday after more than 3 weeks under siege, while Israeli airstrikes destroyed apartments in a densely populated area for the second straight day. The group were the first people to leave Gaza, other than 4 hostages released by Hamas and another rescued by Israeli forces, even as bombings have driven hundreds of thousands from their homes and food, water, and fuel run low. It remained unclear whether more people would be allowed to leave Gaza in coming days. Al Jazeera Television, one of the few media outlets still reporting from northern Gaza, aired footage of leveled apartments in the densely populated Jabalia refugee camp near Gaza City and of several wounded people, including children, being brought to a nearby hospital. The Hamas-run government said airstrikes killed and wounded many people, but the exact toll was not yet known. The Al Jazeera footage showed nearly identical scenes as the day before. Dozens of men dug through the gray rubble of demolished multi-story buildings in search of survivors. The toll from Tuesday's strikes were also unknown, though a director of the nearby hospital said hundreds were killed or wounded. Israel said those strikes killed dozens of militants, including a senior Hamas commander who was involved in the militants' bloody October 7th rampage that ignited the war and destroyed militant tunnels beneath the buildings. In a sign of increasing alarm over the war among Arab countries, Jordan on Wednesday recalled its ambassador from Israel and told Israel's ambassador to remain out of the country. Jordan, a key U.S. ally, signed a peace deal with Israel in 1994, the second Arab country after Egypt to do so. Jordan's Deputy Prime Minister Ayman al-Safadi said the return of the ambassadors is linked to Israel, quote, stopping its war on Gaza and the humanitarian catastrophe it is causing, end of quote. He warned of the potential of the conflict to spread, threatening, quote, the security of the entire region, end of quote. Israeli ground forces pushed to the outskirts of Gaza City days after launching a new phase of the war that Israel's leaders say will be long and difficult. Internet and phone service was cut for several hours Wednesday, a replay of the temporary communications blackout when Israeli ground troops first advanced in large numbers into Gaza over the weekend. Over half of Gaza's 2.3 million people have fled their homes, and supplies of food, medicine, water, and fuel are running low. A territory-wide blackout has left hospitals relying on generators that soon could be forced to shut down. Underlined the anticipated surge in casualties on both sides as Israeli troops advance toward the outskirts of Gaza City and its dense residential neighborhoods. Israeli officials say Hamas's military infrastructure, including hundreds of miles of underground tunnels, is concentrated in the city, which was home to some 650,000 people before the war. 6 buses carrying 335 foreign passport holders left Gaza through the Rafah crossing into Egypt as of mid-afternoon Wednesday, according to Wael Abu Omar, a spokesman for the Palestinian Crossings Authority. The authorities said the plan was for more than 400 foreign passport holders to leave for Egypt. Egypt has said it will not accept an influx of Palestinian refugees because it fears that Israel will not allow them to return to Gaza after the war. Dozens of people could be seen entering the Rafah crossing, the only one currently operating, and ambulances carrying wounded Palestinians exited on the Egyptian side. Egypt had earlier said that more than 80 Palestinians out of many thousands wounded in the war would also be brought in for treatment. But Dr. Mohammed Zakut, a health ministry official in Gaza, told the Associated Press that 10 of the patients died before they could be evacuated to Egypt. The criteria for medical evacuation were not immediately clear. Those who remain behind are contending with multiple crises made worse Wednesday by the communications blackout. The Palestinian telecoms company Paltel said internet and mobile phone services were gradually being restored in Gaza following a complete disruption that lasted several hours. The International Committee of the Red Cross said such blackouts make it harder for civilians to seek safety. Jessica Moussan, an ICRC spokesperson, said, quote, even the potentially life-saving act of calling an ambulance becomes impossible, end of quote. The Palestinian Health Ministry, meanwhile, said that the Turkish-Palestinian hospital, Gaza's only facility offering specialized treatment for cancer patients, was forced to shut down because of a lack of fuel, leaving 70 cancer patients in a critical situation. More than 8,700 Palestinians have been killed in the war, mostly women and minors. More than 22,000 have been wounded, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. They provided those figures Wednesday, but did not provide a breakdown between civilians and fighters. The figure is without precedent in decades of Israeli-Palestinian violence. Over 1,400 people have died on the Israeli side, many civilians killed during Hamas's initial attack, also an unprecedented figure. Palestinian militants also abducted around 240 people during their incursion and have continued firing rockets into Israel. 15 Israeli soldiers have been killed in Gaza since the start of the ground operation. Israel has been vague about its operations in Gaza, but residents and spokesmen for militant groups say troops appear to be trying to take control of the 2 main north-south roads. An estimated 800,000 Palestinians have fled south from Gaza City and other northern areas following Israeli orders to evacuate, but hundreds of thousands remain in the north. Israel has allowed international aid groups to send more than 200 trucks carrying food and medicine to enter from Egypt over the past 10 days, but aid workers say it's not nearly enough. Israel has vowed to crush Hamas's ability to govern in Gaza or threaten it, while also saying it does not plan to reoccupy the territory from which it withdrew soldiers and settlers in 2005. But it has said little about who would govern Gaza afterwards. In congressional testimony on Tuesday, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken suggested that, quote, at some point, what would make the most sense is for an effective and revitalized Palestinian Authority to have governance and ultimately security responsibility for Gaza, end of quote. Hamas drove the authorities' forces out of Gaza in a week of heavy fighting in 2007, leaving it with limited control over parts of the Israeli-occupied West Bank. Palestinian support for the President Mahmoud Abbas has plunged since then, with many Palestinians dismissing the Palestinian Authority as little more than Israel's police force because it helps suppress Hamas and other militant groups. In other developments, in the West Bank, Israeli forces raided the Jenin refugee camp Wednesday morning, killing 3 Palestinians, according to local health officials. The Israeli military said it carried out a drone strike in the camp, hitting several militants. Since the war began, 130 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank, either by Israeli forces or by Jewish settlers. In northern Israel, mortars and anti-tank rockets were fired from Lebanon towards several Israeli communities, causing no injuries and prompting Israeli strikes on the launch sites, according to the Israeli military. Hezbollah and Palestinian militants in Lebanon have exchanged fire with Israeli forces on a daily basis over the border. So there's the latest happenings in the Israel-Hamas war. And once again, I'm calling on both sides to quit, knock it off, have a ceasefire, and get things restored. Specifically for those people, these are innocent people, folks, that are in the middle of all this. They didn't do a thing to deserve to get bombed because their leaders, I don't know. This is just really disheartening. I wish this war would end, and soon, for the sake of all the people that are not even involved in this. And I'm talking both Israeli and Palestinian. And I'm going to go a little bit off on a tangent here because police forces in this country, and for that matter, security officials here, have said there's been increased threats of violence against one side or the other. You've got people going after Jewish people, which is not right. Just as the same as people going after Palestinians, that's not right either. Good Lord. All right, let's get into some labor news. The UAW has settled with all 3 of the big 3 automakers. Ford was first, then Stellantis, and then finally bringing up the rear, General Motors finally stepped in line. What does the new contract offer? Again, this is a tentative contract. This has not been voted on by the rank and file members of the UAW with Ford, Stellantis, and GM. The new contract, as it's been tentatively ratified, is a 25% pay increase over the next 4 years. So if they're making $30 an hour, they're going to be making $37.50 by the time it's done, by the time the contract is over. Increased health benefits, better retirement, and most importantly, the end of the tier system. The tier system is chucked out the window. New hires get paid as much as somebody who's been there for a long time, and that's the way it should have been. Now, I've been hearing rumblings that the UAW said that they're going to go after other automakers that have plants in this country. As a result, a Toyota plant held an emergency meeting and offered their workers, and I believe this was somewhere in Alabama or Tennessee, offered them $32 an hour just to keep the union out. So there you go, folks. You can say, well, but the unions, they just protect all their own workers and blah, 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 blah. But when unions succeed, that also helps people that are not in unions. It helps out other workers that are not unionized, like the Toyota plant that I just mentioned. That's the power of unions. Solidarity forever, folks. Solidarity forever. Speaking of, we have our next strike to talk about. This is Claire Rush writing for the Associated Press. This is dated November 1st out of Portland, Oregon. Teachers in Portland, Oregon walked off the job on Wednesday for the first day of a strike that will shutter schools for some 45,000 students in Oregon's largest city. Concerns over large class sizes, salaries that haven't kept up with inflation, and a lack of resources prompted the strike, one of the latest signs of a growing organized labor movement in the U.S. that's seen thousands of workers in various sectors take to the picket lines this year. The Portland Association of Teachers, which represents more than 4,000 educators, said it was the first ever teachers' strike in the school district. The union has been bargaining with the district for months for a new contract after its previous one expired in June. Portland Public Schools did not respond to requests for comment on Tuesday night or Wednesday morning. Schools are closed and there is no classroom or online instruction during the strike. Mike Bauer, a union representative and special education teacher at Cleveland High School, said teachers were stressed about the strike but felt it was the right way to advocate for their students. He said that smaller class sizes would both lighten educators' workload and help them give students more individualized attention if they're struggling. Bauer, who's been teaching in Portland for nearly 20 years, said, quote, "It's about the kids, it's about the sustainability of the job and the longevity of our jobs," end of quote. Questions of pay, particularly for teachers just starting their career, have also been raised as the cost of living has increased in Portland, Oregon. Bauer said the annual base salary in the district starts at roughly $50,000, adding, quote, "I've seen many people quit within their first 5 years. At the end of the day, we need teachers," end of quote. Nearly 2 weeks ago, the union announced that 99% of teachers voted in favor of the labor action, with 93% of its members participating in the ballot. Uh-oh. This is going to go on for a while. This is great. I love it. After the union voted to authorize the strike, the district said it wanted to reach a fair settlement. Oh, really? Yeah, I'm sure they did. I'm very sure they did. In an emailed statement on October 20th, it said, quote, "We asked our educators to stay at the table with us, not close schools," end of quote. Yeah, right. Oregon Governor Tina Kotek had urged the union and the school district to come to an agreement and avoid a walkout. Well, when they can't reach an agreement, you gotta strike. Strikes work, folks. Pickets work. Public education has been gripped by a series of high-profile strikes this year. In the Los Angeles Unified School District, the nation's second largest, workers, including teachers' aides, cafeteria workers, and custodians, walked out for 3 days in March to demand better wages and increased staffing, shutting down education for 500,000 students. In Oakland, California, the union representing the teachers, counselors, librarians, and other workers went on strike for more than a week in May. In addition to typical demands such as higher salaries, it also pushed for common good changes such as reparations for black students and resources for students who are homeless. See, it's not the people in charge that's watching out for the kids. It's not the administrators. It's not the superintendent. It's not the Board of Education. It's the teachers. They are the frontline worker when it comes to children. They're the ones to see it all. They see kids succeeding, failing, and getting to the reasons why they're failing, such as a bad home life, homeless, being bullied, whatever. They're the ones to see this. It's not the administrators. It's not the education board. It's not the superintendent. So There you go. You need to listen to your teachers and support your teachers by letting them picket. Michigan needs to get rid of the law that was passed 30 years ago that said the teachers couldn't strike, because that's a violation of the First Amendment, first of all. So, calling on the Democrats to please do that. I'm also calling on the Democrats to clean house in their own group. I have this story. This is Jonathan Osting writing for Bridge, Michigan. This is dated October 26th out of Lansing. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer on Thursday backed what critics are calling a weak personal financial disclosure plan and said she won't adhere to a campaign promise to unilaterally open her office to public records requests. Speaking with reporters after a Michigan Press Association lunch, the second-term Democrat said she would sign recently introduced personal financial disclosure legislation despite what critics say are glaring loopholes. Fellow Democrats like Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, State Representative Phil Skaggs, and former State Representative David LeGrand are urging the Senate to expand its proposed disclosure package by requiring candidates and elected officials to also disclose the income and assets of their spouses. I'm going to say this. I can't believe that I am agreeing with a corporatist prick like Phil Skaggs. Hell is frozen over, folks. LeGrand said this week that doing so would ensure candidates for political office cannot transfer assets to a spouse in order to hide potential conflicts of interest, arguing that the current language is a con job that creates a hole large enough to, quote, drive the Titanic through, end of quote. There you go, folks. Michigan has a dubious distinction as one of the least transparent states in the nation, earning failing grades on government integrity and ethics laws, which is true. Michigan is one of only 2 states where the legislature and the governor are exempt from Freedom of Information Act requests. That's ridiculous. And that's something that Whitmer championed to change those laws when she was a state senator herself almost 20 years ago. Now that she's governor, now she's backtracking. Speaking to the press group, Whitmer said that, quote, transparency must extend to every entity that serves the people, end of quote, and told media professionals she is excited to work with the legislature to strengthen laws. But speaking with reporters after the event, the governor said that she favors the limited spousal disclosure proposed in the Senate bills, which would only require elected officials and candidates to report the name and occupation of their spouse, not the spouse's actual income, employer, or separately held assets. Whitmer told reporters, quote, there is a legitimate concern that this kind of information will be held against female candidates for positions in a way that it won't be held against male candidates for positions. End of quote. Really? Sorry, Governor, I love you, but bullshit. She continued, quote, and I think that's something that raises some red flags for me. But if it is a matter of their name and their occupation, you can Google and find that. So I don't have a problem with that. End of quote. That appears to be a new position for Whitmer, who as a state senator in 2006 co-sponsored personal financial disclosure legislation that would have required spousal income reporting. So she's flip-flopped after 17 years on this issue. Whitmer also told reporters that she has no plans to voluntarily open her office to Freedom of Information Act requests, despite a 2018 campaign vow to do so. Michigan and Massachusetts are the only states that exempt the governor and legislature from the law that allows the citizens to obtain public records. Democrats who lead the legislature had promised to change the law this year, but now acknowledge they are punting any action on that front until at least next year. When asked why she had not fulfilled her campaign pledge, Whitmer told reporters Thursday, quote, we need to make sure that the legislature is also transparent, and I know that if I do it unilaterally, they will lose any motivation to do anything, end of quote. Well, the Republicans in the legislature would, that's for damn sure. She continued, quote, And so it is a part of leveraging to get it done right, not just done unilaterally and can be undone by the next governor. End of quote. I have to agree with her there, because who could be next? Could it be another Republican? Typically in Michigan, after a Democrat has held office for 8 years, typically it goes back to the Republicans because people forget how bad things were when it was under Republican rule, because people have short-term memories. Her comments come as the legislature is racing to finalize personal financial disclosure rules by the end of this year, which is required under a constitutional amendment approved last fall by 66% of voters. So 2/3 of the state voters said, you're going to disclose your finances to us, period. I love it. I love that the people in Michigan can put a ballot proposal on anytime they want to. This is beautiful. Absolutely perfect. In recent weeks, conflict of interest questions have surrounded House Appropriations Chair Angela Whitmer, who founded a consulting company that does business with the state. A former House Speaker, Rick Johnson, was also recently sentenced to prison after he was convicted of accepting medical marijuana licensing board bribes in a scheme that involved consulting payments to his wife. Prior to passage of last year's constitutional amendment, Proposal 1, Michigan had been one of only 2 states without any rules requiring public officials to publicly disclose income sources or assets. Supporters call the Senate package an important first step for transparency under majority Democrats, who this year took full control of the state government for the first time in 4 decades. But one of the state's top Democrats, Benson, argued on Wednesday that the minimal spousal provision in the Senate disclosure legislation, quote, creates too many loopholes, end of quote, and would render the law, quote, relatively ineffective, end of quote. And she's got that right. She also raised concerns about proposed gift disclosure rules, but offered general support for the legislative effort. Benson told lawmakers, quote, if you're going to include spouses, then you should do so in a meaningful way or not at all, end of quote. Yep, I agree. State Representative Phil Skaggs, Ethics and Oversight Committee Chair Aaron Burns, and 20 other House Democrats introduced their own personal financial disclosure bills on Wednesday afternoon that proposed more robust reporting requirements for spouses along with any dependents. Skaggs, Democrat of East Grand Rapids, said that because Michigan is a joint marital asset state, a candidate or elected official could transfer assets to a spouse without much risk of losing an equal share in the event the couple later decides to divorce. That means the Senate bills would allow a, quote, very easy way to hide assets and conflicts from voters, end of quote. Skaggs told Bridge, Michigan, that most states with financial disclosure rules require the same level of disclosure for spouses. He added, quote, if we're going to have financial disclosure which voters are going to believe is genuine, then we have to make sure that there are not places where candidates and elected officials can easily hide their money, end of quote. Once again, I'm going to say it. Hell is frozen over. I agree with Phil Skaggs on something. Unbelievable. While Skaggs and other colleagues are hopeful that elements of their proposal reach the governor's desk, Democratic House Speaker Joe Tate of Detroit made clear this week that he intends to consider only the Senate version if it is passed by the upper chamber. Whitmer would not say whether she would sign the legislation if lawmakers decided to toughen the spousal disclosure provisions. She said Thursday, quote, I'm not going to make any veto threats right now. I'm going to continue talking with the legislature, but I think I've been pretty clear about what I think is important, end of quote. She told reporters, however, that she believes Michigan is, quote, on the cusp of making a great step forward when it comes to increased transparency, end of quote, because Democrats are in charge. Not the way they're going. You've got the House saying, yeah, we need the tougher disclosures, and the Senate saying, no, we really don't. Here's the problem. They got to get it done by this year because there's a provision in Proposal 1 that says it needs to be done by the calendar year 2023 or else. What's that or else? Or else a citizen can file a lawsuit with the state of Michigan because they didn't get the job done and could get monetary damages. There you go, folks. That is why we have ballot initiatives in Michigan that are started by the voters themselves. This is a classic example of why that works and why both Republicans and Democrats would love to get rid of it. I'm telling you the truth, folks. Telling you the truth. All right, let's get to our next story here. This is the Associated Press. This is dated October 23rd. Listen to this, folks. We haven't talked about any big oil industry news, but this is a huge one. Listen to this, folks. Chevron is buying Hess Corporation for $53 billion, and it's not even the biggest acquisition in the energy sector this month, as major producers seize the initiative while oil prices surge. Crude prices rose sharply in early 2022 with Russia's invasion of Ukraine and are hovering around $90 per barrel after ticking another 9% higher this year, meaning big drillers are flush with cash and looking for places to invest piles of cash. The Chevron-Hess deal comes less than 2 weeks after ExxonMobil said that it would acquire Pioneer Natural Resources for about $60 billion. That's billion with a B, folks. Upward pressure on oil prices are being applied from a number of fronts, including the war on Ukraine. So let me add this real quick while I am thinking about this. While Chevron and Hess merge and while ExxonMobil and Pioneer merge, guess what they're getting from the United States government? They're getting welfare, corporate welfare, to the tune of billions of dollars every year. To ExxonMobil, to Shell, to Amoco, BP, whatever, Marathon, Speedway, Phillips 66, Union 76. They're all getting it. All of them. Why? Because they're the ones that send their lobbyists to Washington and say, oh, we need this, we need this. Oh, don't tax us so badly. That's why the oil companies pay zip in taxes while they're getting what I call corporate welfare, which they are. They really are, folks. Just take a look. Go to Google and type, how much do oil companies get from the federal government in welfare, corporate welfare? You'll find the answers. It's to the tune of billions of dollars. Let me continue here. Oil markets are being stretched by cutbacks in oil production from Saudi Arabia and Russia, and now a war between Israel and Hamas runs the risk of igniting a broader conflict in the Middle East. While attacks on Israel do not disrupt global oil supply, according to an analysis by the U.S. Energy Information Administration, they raise the potential for oil supply disruptions and higher oil prices. Isn't that lovely? Chevron said Monday that the acquisition of Hess adds a major oil field in Guyana, as well as shale properties in the Bakken Formation in North Dakota. Guyana is a Southern American country of 791,000 people that is poised to become the world's fourth largest offshore oil producer, placing it ahead of Qatar, the United States, Mexico, and Norway. It has become a major producer in recent years with oil giants including ExxonMobil, China's CNOOC, and also Hess, squared off in a heated competition for highly lucrative oil fields in northern South America. Chevron chairman and CEO Mike Wirth said in prepared remarks, quote, "This combination is aligned with our objective to safely deliver higher returns and lower carbon. In addition, Hess increases Chevron's estimated production and free cash flow growth rates over the next 5 years, and is expected to extend our growth profile into the next decade, supporting our plans to increase our peer-leading dividend growth and share repurchases." End of quote. So that's what they're doing with the money. They're going to repurchase all of their outstanding shares so they can privatize. Folks, this is bullshit. This needs to be put an end to by the federal government, people like Bernie Sanders, who has been pretty much the only one in Congress speaking about this for the last several decades. Bernie's right, and we need to do something about it. Let me continue. Chevron is paying for Hess with stock. Hess shareholders will receive 1.0250 shares of Chevron for each Hess share. Including debt, Chevron valued the deal at $60 billion. And even with alarms being raised over climate change after a summer of record-smashing temperatures, elevated energy prices have driven more exploration and more drilling and big payouts for investors. Last month, Britain gave the go-ahead for a major oil and gas project in the North Sea, ignoring warnings from scientists and the United Nations that countries must stop developing new fossil fuel resources if the world is to avoid catastrophic climate change. Chevron said the deal will help to increase the amount of cash given back to shareholders. Because at the end of the day, that's all they care about is their shareholders. They don't care about the consumer. The consumer can go take a flying leap as far as they're concerned as long as they're raking in the money. The company anticipates that in January it will be able to recommend boosting its first quarter dividend by 8% to $1.63. This would still need board approval. The company also expects to increase stock buybacks by $2.5 billion to the top end of its guidance range of $20 billion per year once the transaction closes. The boards of both Chevron and Hess have approved the deal announced Monday after 6 months of negotiations and is targeted to close in the first half of next year. It still needs approval by Hess shareholders. John Hess, the company's CEO, is expected to join Chevron's board. His family owns a large chunk of Hess. Sales of Chevron Corporation, based in San Ramon, California, declined more than 2% before the opening bell Monday. Shares of Hess Corporation, based in New York City, rose slightly. So it's a money deal. It's all about trading those greenbacks for black crude. Black crude gets you green money. Really, it does? All right, let's go ahead to our next story here. We got to talk about Donald Trump. He keeps opening his mouth and getting in trouble. This is Jennifer Peltz and Jake Offenhartz writing for the Associated Press. This is dated October 25th out of New York City. We didn't have a chance to get to this story last week because we were tied up with the topics that we discussed then. Michael Cohen returned to the witness stand Wednesday in his ex-boss Donald Trump's civil business fraud trial as Trump's defense team tried to undermine the credibility and question the motives of his one-time personal attorney turned adversary. Outside the courtroom, Trump's commentary led the judge to weigh whether Trump had violated a gag order imposed earlier in the case. With Trump at the defense table, his lawyer Alina Habba confronted Cohen with comments he had made praising Trump before turning on him when Cohen's legal problems started in 2018. Habba tried to suggest that Cohen had angled unsuccessfully for a job in Trump's White House. Cohen insisted he never sought one and asked whether he had significant animosity toward Trump. Cohen replied, quote, "Do I have animosity toward him? Yes, I do." End of quote. Habba asked, "You have made a career out of publicly attacking Donald Trump, haven't you?" End of quote. By the way, I've switched that. The copy says President Trump. We do not refer to Donald Trump as president on this show, either in the past, currently, or in the future. After a long pause, Cohen said yes. Cohen worked as Trump's lawyer and fixer for many years before Cohen's 2018 federal prosecution, guilty pleas, and prison sentence for tax evasion, making false statements on a bank loan application, lying to Congress, and making illegal contributions to Trump's campaign. The contributions were in the form of payouts to women who said they had extramarital sexual encounters with Trump, who said the women's stories were false. Oh, they're all false, aren't they? Yeah. Yeah, we all know that's bullshit. Stormy Daniels, Marla Maples. Oh, boy. Unbelievable, folks. Cohen is now a key witness in New York Attorney General Letitia James's civil case against Trump. James alleges that Trump habitually exaggerated the value of his real estate holdings on financial documents that helped him get loans and insurance and make deals. Trump denies any wrongdoing and says James, a Democrat, is targeting the leading Republican presidential candidate in 2024 for partisan reasons. Oh, yeah. During a break in the testimony Wednesday, Trump complained that Judge Arthur Engoron, a Democrat, is, quote, a very partisan judge with a person who's very partisan sitting alongside of him, perhaps even much more partisan than he is, end of quote. That remark came weeks after a Trump social media post about Engoron's law clerk, who sits beside the judge, prompted Engoron to issue the narrow gag order and tell Trump to take the post down. That order bars all participants in the case from commenting about any member of the judge's staff. The judge fined Trump $5,000 on Friday after learning that the post had lingered on Trump's campaign website for weeks, though it had been removed from his Truth Social platform. After learning of Trump's latest comment, Engoron asked, quote, why should there not be severe sanctions for this blatant, dangerous disobeyal of a clear court order, end of quote. In response, defense lawyer Christopher Caius insisted that Trump was talking about Cohen, not the judge's law clerk. Engoron said he would take the matter under advisement and testimony resumed. When the trial broke for lunch, the judge held a closed-door meeting that included Trump and his lawyers. When Trump emerged, he declined to disclose what was discussed, but told reporters that he had not violated the gag order, saying his earlier comment was not directed at Engoron's clerk. Trump ignored questions about who he was targeting. But we'll get to that in just a little bit here. During his first day of testimony Tuesday, Cohen said he and key executives of Trump's company worked to inflate the estimated values of their employers' holdings so documents given to banks and others would match a net worth that Trump had set arbitrarily. In cross-examining Cohen, Haba emphasized his federal criminal convictions and worked to portray him as a liar, especially after he said Tuesday he had lied when he pleaded guilty to tax evasion and loan application lies. Cohen asserted that he did not really commit those crimes, and he sought to portray his conduct as a matter of omissions and failure to correct paperwork. Haba returned to those themes Wednesday, underscoring that Cohen had admitted in open court to lying under oath in a federal courthouse next door. By the way, Trump's crack about the judge being a partisan person with a person sitting alongside him who's perhaps even more partisan, that crack cost him $10,000 on top of the $5,000 that he's already been fined. This is beautiful. I love it. Let Donald Trump open his mouth, because that costs him money every time he does, and I love it. And let's go ahead, since we're talking about Trump, let's get to the next story here. This is Michael R. Sizak writing for the Associated Press. This is dated November 1st out of New York City. When Donald Trump became president in 2017, he handed the day-to-day management of his real estate empire to his eldest sons, Donald Jr. and Eric. Now, as the Trumps fight to keep the family business intact, the brothers are set to testify in the New York civil fraud case that threatens their Trump organization's future. Donald Trump Jr. is expected to testify Wednesday and Eric Trump on Thursday, kicking off a blockbuster stretch as the trial in New York Attorney General Letitia James's lawsuit enters its second month. James, a Democrat, alleges that Donald Trump, his company, and top executives, including Eric and Donald Trump Jr., conspired to exaggerate his wealth by billions of dollars on financial statements that were given to banks, insurers, and others to secure loans and make deals. Donald Trump, the family patriarch and 2024 Republican frontrunner, is slated to testify Monday, followed by his eldest daughter, ex-Trump Organization executive and White House advisor Ivanka Trump, on November 8th. State lawyers are expected to rest their case after that, giving Trump's lawyers a chance to call their own witnesses. Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump are both executive vice presidents at the Trump Organization and defendants in James's lawsuit. Eric has oversight over the company's operations, while Donald Trump Jr. has been involved in running the company's property development. He and longtime company finance chief Alan Weisselberg were also trustees of the revocable trust Trump set up to hold the company's assets when he became president. Before the trial, Judge Arthur Engoron ruled that Trump's financial statements were fraudulent. He ordered that a court-appointed receiver seize control of some of his companies, potentially stripping him and his family of such marquee properties as Trump Tower, though an appeals court has halted enforcement for now. Like their father, both brothers have denied wrongdoing. Eric Trump has spent several days at the trial, often on the days his dad has been there. He's commented sporadically, mostly on social media. On October 5, he posted a video montage to Truth Social of James criticizing his father. With it, he wrote, quote, "This is the corruption my father and our family is fighting. The system is weaponized, broken, and disgusting." End of quote. No, the system's running good in this case, for once. Donald Trump Jr. hasn't been to court, but since testimony began October 2nd, he's repeatedly denounced the case in Engeron as a kangaroo court. State law doesn't allow for juries in this type of lawsuits, so Engeron will decide the case. Donald Trump Jr. said on Newsmax Monday, quote, "It doesn't matter what the rules are. It doesn't matter what the Constitution says. It doesn't matter what general practices in business would be. It doesn't matter. They have a narrative. They have an end goal, and they'll do whatever it takes to get there." End of quote. No, you're talking about yourself there, buddy. Donald Trump blasted Engeron Wednesday on Truth Social as a Trump-hating political hack who, quote, "is doing the dirty work for the Democrat Party." End of quote. Oh, God. In one of several posts, Trump wrote, quote, "Leave my children alone, Engeron. You are a disgrace to the legal profession." End of quote. No, far from it. Go get them, Judge Engeron. Go get their asses. Put them in a sling. Building to Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump's testimony, state lawyers have asked other witnesses about their role leading the Trump organization and their involvement over the years in valuing their father's properties and preparing his financial statements. Their names have also appeared on various emails and documents entered into evidence. David McArdle, an appraiser at commercial real estate firm Cushman & Wakefield, testified that Eric Trump had substantial input on valuing planned but never built townhomes at a Trump-owned golf course in the New York City suburbs. McArdle said Eric Trump arrived at a more lofty value than him for the project, but that going with the Scion's higher number wouldn't have been credible. Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump have already been heard from at the trial, albeit in snippets of prior testimony. During opening statements on October 2nd, state lawyers showed about a minute each of sworn depositions the brothers gave in the case. In his July 2022 clip, Donald Trump Jr. testified about his scant knowledge of the accounting standards known as generally accepted accounting principles, which state lawyers say were used at times and disregarded at others in preparing Donald Trump's financial statements. Trump Jr., who's never been an accountant, said he couldn't recall having to use the GAAP standards in his work. He got a laugh out of a state lawyer when he said he learned about them probably in Accounting 101 at Wharton, but didn't remember much other than they were, quote, generally accepted, end of quote. So Donald Trump Jr. is also a raving moron, lunatic. Wow. In his March 2023 deposition, Eric Trump testified, quote, "I don't think I've had any involvement in the state of financial condition to the best of my knowledge," end of quote. He appeared to minimize his role as a top company executive, testifying that he tried to remain, quote, "siloed into the things I care and are passionate about," end of quote, while sharing management responsibilities with his brother. According to a deposition transcript posted on the case docket, Eric Trump said, quote, "I'm a construction, concrete, and on-the-ground operations guy," end of quote. Questioned at another point about decision-making earlier in his career, Eric Trump said, quote, "I pour concrete, I operate properties, I don't focus on appraisals between a law firm and Cushman. This is not what I do in my day-to-day responsibilities," end of quote. I could just see Eric Trump smoothing out concrete and trying to get the bubbles out of the concrete and smoothing it so it's level. Eric Trump has never worked a day in his life. He's never hit a lick, just like Betsy DeVos has never hit a lick anywhere in her life. In the case of Betsy DeVos, she was born into money and married into more of it. In Eric Trump's case, he was born into money. Period. Donald Trump attended the trial's first 3 days in early October and showed up again for 4 days in the past 2 weeks, but his campaign schedule suggests it's unlikely he'll return to see his sons testify. Well, when Donald Sr. testifies, we will have that on our next show. Actually, before we get to our next segment here, we have an update to Adeline Hambley, the embattled public health officer of Ottawa County, Michigan. We told you last week that a hearing was held to terminate her as the chief public health officer. Now the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners has decided to delay voting until Monday, November 6th. So we will have the results of that on next week's show. But in the meantime, let's go ahead to our next segment.
Hammer time.
Uh-oh. It's hammer time. It's been a while. This is the Douche Hammer of the Week segment. Boy, we've got a good one. Next door to Ottawa County is Allegan County, and our winner this week is State Representative Rochelle Smith. We have this story. This is Ken Kolker writing for Wood Television. This is dated October 27th. Listen to this, folks. A West Michigan state legislator paid tribute Friday to two men acquitted in the failed plot to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer, with Representative Rochelle Smith saying she was doing so on behalf of the state. The governor's office responded, "Not so fast." Smith, who is a Republican out of Shelbyville, which is not too far from Grand Rapids, said at an event in Allegan, quote, "We're here to recognize Bill and Mike Knoll for their unfortunate involvement in this scandal, if you will, and that's what I'm going to call it. If you would just accept these tributes on behalf of the state of Michigan and our office as your representative in the 43rd District," end of quote. You have got to be absolutely joking on this. The governor's press secretary called the tribute, quote, "disturbing," end of quote. In an email to Wood Television, Press Secretary Stacey LaRouche said, quote, "This goes beyond the pale. These types of actions normalize and incite violence against our political figures and only serve to shake our faith in our values and our institutions. This tribute will further encourage and embolden radical extremists trying to sow discord and harm public officials or law enforcement," end of quote. Smith gave William and Michael Knoll, both of Ottawa County, the hometown hero treatment on the steps of the Allegan County Courthouse, along with their defense attorneys. What did the Knoll brothers do? They were among 14 men charged in state and federal courts in a plot to kidnap and murder Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer in 2020. They keep saying a plot to kidnap in the media. No, it was more than that. They were going to kidnap and murder her in a fake trial, a kangaroo court, if you will. 9 of the defendants were convicted and sent to prison, including the ringleaders, Adam Fox and Barry Croft Jr., despite arguments that they were entrapped by the FBI. 5 others were acquitted, including the Knoll brothers and Eric Molitor, who were accused of supporting leaders by participating in military-style drills and traveling to see Whitmer's second home in northern Michigan. The tribute honored the Knolls for their, quote, "courage, unflagging spirit, and dedication to our state and the founding principles of our beloved nation," end of quote. It thanked them for, quote, "keeping alive our cherished liberties," end of quote. No, they're traitors. They are violent, conservative traitors. The tribute states the men could have given up in the face of a government that betrayed them and secret police forces that concocted the kidnapping plot for political gain. Oh, Jesus Christ, what a bunch of horse shit this is. The tribute continues, but at great personal risk, each of the brothers, quote, "stood his ground, met his government inquisitors in court, and soundly defeated them," end of quotes. They're a bunch of tyrannists, traitors. The tribute says each of the brothers, quote, "is an outstanding example of the kind of person who is not content to sit idly while the forces of tyranny attack our republic," end of quote. Yeah, the ones that are getting the award are the ones that are tyrannists. You better learn that, folks. You morons in Allegan County, you better figure it out real fast. And by morons in Allegan County, I'm talking about every goddamn one of you that votes Republican. The tribute states, quote, the people of the state of Michigan owe a debt of gratitude to Mr. Null, end of quote. No, what they owe them is a seat in the electric chair if Michigan would ever get off their ass and get the death penalty back. William Nola said he and his brother spent 2 months in jail, said, quote, I'm glad there is still justice in America. I spent 30 days in solitary confinement and then another week or two in max security, end of quote. Justice. Justice my ass. He said they did nothing illegal, and that was his smiling face that led to his arrest. Oh, really? No. It wouldn't have anything to do with the fact that you were looking at the governor's second home to lay it out and plant bombs on the bridge, to blow up the bridge to keep the cops from coming. Sons of bitches. Michael Knoll said, quote, I just want to thank everybody for their support, the defense team, all of the friends and family that went to bat for us. A lot of people we don't know stood up for us. They know us, and they know we would never be a part of anything like this. End of quote. The problem is you were. You already were caught by the FBI. You liars. Smith was reluctant to answer questions about the Tribune and whether it was on behalf of state government. Yeah, she tried to avoid Ken Kolker like the Black Plague. She told News 8, quote, well, I am a representative of the state. This is from my office, the 43rd District State Representative Rochelle Smith. These are my constituents, and I am here to come out on behalf of them and support them in their efforts, and grateful that the charges are dismissed and they are found innocent. End of quote. So that's what you have for leadership in Allegan County. Evil, violent, conservative traitors. I tell you what, Rachel Smith needs to be expelled from office. The Democrats better do something about this, and they better do something right now. This should take precedent over all other business in the state legislature. Do what you need to do. She needs to be expelled from office. Censure her, impeach her, and then convict her and remove her now. And, of course, she is our douchebag of the week for this week, so we have this message for you. Yeah, you got that right. Traitorous douchebag that needs to go back home. Better yet, she needs to be in prison because she supports these kooks and nuts. Folks, I'm telling you right now, the people that have sense in the state of Michigan, and for that matter, everywhere in the world, the people that have sense need to stand up and take control of power. Because obviously, we have idiots running things. We have in Ottawa County. We do in Allegan. What's going to be next? Are we going to applaud the Confederates? Oh, wait, we already did that. That's it for this week. Please support independent media, the First Amendment, and a woman's right to choose.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.